Thank you. I'm sorry, are you guys all hungover from yesterday? Because you're not really loud enough for me. Yeah, there you go. Let's go. Pick it up. Speaking of magic internet JPEGs, have you guys seen these shirts? They're pretty much a hot commodity in the Bitcoin eco. And now I get to fulfill my Oprah dream and say that hands up, wake up, you get a Wizards t-shirt. And you get a Wizards t-shirt. Oh, I have two more. You get a Wizards t-shirt, and one of y'all get a Wizards t-shirt. Excellent. Here's your t-shirt. All right, guys, let's get this panel kicking. All right, on that note. So, like I said, I'm Hillary Adler. I'm the VP of Marketing at Thesis. We are a venture production studio building and investing in Bitcoin-related projects and products. I want to let these gents introduce themselves as well. And I also want to ask you one fundamental question for each of you to address, which is, why do you think now is the time in the market for L2s? They're proliferating like crazy. We all know that. So introduce yourselves, your company, your project, and answer that question first, and we'll kick it off.
All right, thanks so much. So I'm Alexei. I'm one of the co-founders of Bob. We are a hybrid Bitcoin layer 2 building between Bitcoin and Ethereum, so super excited to be here at ETHDenver. I've been working on Bitcoin research for the last 9 years, always trying to do more with it than just payments. And the reason I think now is the time to really explore Bitcoin layer 2s is, on one hand, the technology is more mature than ever before. ETH2s are really production ready. You see billions of dollars in volume and TVL. But then on the Bitcoin side, and I think Udi talked about this, there's a culture shift. It's okay now, again, to come to build on Bitcoin. You can be innovative, you can experiment, and the new kids on the block are taking over, and that's why I think we're experiencing this Bitcoin renaissance.
Hey, I'm Red. I'm a research analyst at Masari. We try to add some transparency to this industry. And I cover Bitcoin and stacks and some other base layers. I think the reason that now we're seeing so many layers pop up is not a change in demand. I think there's always been some demand for that, but there have been some tech breakthroughs that have maybe stirred up a little more excitement in that area, and I think that's why so much of this is kicking up right now.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Muneeb. I'm the founder of Stacks. It's a Bitcoin L2. I started my career in Bitcoin around 11 years ago. Big believer in Bitcoin as freedom money. And I think we started off in around 2017 because we have some battle scars from building directly on Bitcoin L1 and realizing that the L1 is never going to scale. So I think 2017 is when Lightning started, when Stacks started, and we have been believers in L2s for a very long time, have done a lot of groundwork, and it's just amazing to see it emerge as a category last year. And I think that your question is like very relevant, that why is it happening now? Why didn't it happen before? I would say that one of the biggest things was ordinals. You guys just heard from Udi. And showing real usage on the L1. Like, it's almost like if you break the L1, it's very obvious to people that you need the L2s. So when the fees did 200x directly on the L1 because of ordinals, it became abundantly clear to everybody that we need the L2s. And I think some of the work that we've been doing on building dev communities, dev tooling, that made sure that there was enough momentum when people started coming in, that they saw that there's already a dev community, there's already excitement, people are already building stuff. And now with the new L2s coming in, I think it becomes a category. Like, I think ETH L2s are something like a 70, 80 billion category right now. Bitcoin L2s are newer, they're around like 5 billion or so. Right now we are like 95% of the market, but we don't want to be that, right? Like, we want the pie to grow for everybody. We want tons of experiments and tons of different designs being explored, because that is better for Bitcoin and it's better for our industry.
All right, I'm David Shea. I'm a co-founder of Babylon. So Babylon, we started 2 years ago. So we are a big believer in Bitcoin. We always believe in Bitcoin even before there were ordinals. And what do we believe? We believe that Bitcoin is the most secure blockchain ever. And we should always leverage that. And so our protocols that we build are trying to leverage the security to benefit the rest of the blockchain ecosystem, particularly proof of stake chains. So we came up with a new protocol recently called Bitcoin staking, which is to take Bitcoin and use that to secure proof of stake chain through staking. Okay, so why L2 now? So 3 things. Muneeb already mentioned order nodes from the application side. But from the technology side, it took a few years in Ethereum to really understand how to build rollups. Many new ideas have come in: optimistic rollups, ZK rollups, fraud proofs, data availability. Many new ideas were developed more on the Ethereum side. And now you can see these ideas coming back to benefit us from a technological point of view, how to build rollups layer 2 properly.
Awesome. I will quickly add one more thing to David's point. In terms of why now, a big technical breakthrough is also BitVM, right? So if you talk to a lot of Ethereum researchers, one of the biggest criticism they had for Bitcoin L2s is that there are trust assumptions in moving BTC from L1 to L2. And BitVM, think of that as almost like a fraud-proof-like system. It opens the door to having much more trustless way of moving BTC from L1 to L2. And I think that's the last missing piece, which we have now, and that enables Bitcoin L2s.
And BitVM itself borrowed from optimistic rollup ideas.
Okay, Muneeb, I want to start with you now. By the way, can you move your mic up a little bit? I think folks might have a hard time hearing you a little bit. As the OG L2 builder, what do you hope specifically that the L2 ecosystem does in its expansion, and what does it accomplish?
Is the question more about what should happen now? Like what direction should we go in?
Yeah, I think just what do you hope the Bitcoin L2 ecosystem accomplishes as it expands is probably the more succinct way to put it.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, I think there's an amazing opportunity to learn from everything that has already happened in ETH L2s, right? Like there was this old saying in Bitcoin, 10 years ago, that all the successful experiments would eventually come to Bitcoin. And I think because so much experimentation has happened in Ethereum, and they do have a very innovative experimental mindset, I do think that Bitcoin L2s would sort of they will remix some of the ideas, but I do think that there will likely be a more focus on security and being more risk averse than some of the experiments that we have seen outside of Bitcoin, right? Because I think people really value their BTC. Like having hacks of BTC and things, they're much more impactful, and the culture is very different in that sense. So I'll give you a concrete example. Like for example, in Stacks, we actually don't use Turing complete languages. We use Clarity, which is a much safer programming language. Like that makes some things harder because people have to learn something new. But we fundamentally believe that in Bitcoin, security and safety is actually paramount. The second quick point I would make here is what I would love to see is tons of collaboration and the mindset of let's everyone come together and increase the pie for everybody. Versus what we've seen 3-4 years ago was that even relatively small Bitcoin projects are basically gunning at each other and trying to do internal politics and whatnot. And we've been trying to change that culture. We organize events, we invite anyone who's building on Bitcoin, and we are seeing that happen. David and these guys had an event yesterday. It was packed, but it was a very friendly sort of a Bitcoin builders movement. And I'd love to double down on it and continue that because I think that's going to be key.
Very much a rising tides lift all boats mindset.
I think that's going to be key.
Alexei, David, do you guys have anything to add there?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. Yesterday's event, we organized a Bitcoin event in ETHDenver, and 1,200 people showed up.
Wild.
Yay.
Yeah, we'll clap for ourselves.
And we plan to do more of those. So yeah, I think the goal of BTC Renaissance as an event was to showcase that there are synergies between Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cosmos, and other ecosystems. And what was really cool about it is this positive vibe. We had people from Cosmos, from Polygon, but also Raf from Ordinals speak on stage all together. And I think that just shows maximalism is not great. And I think if we work together, we can achieve much bigger things and just grow the pie. And I think that's what the event stands for.
Okay, so on the flip side of that, David, what do you think the Ethereum ecosystem did right when they approached layer 2s, and what do you hope the Bitcoin ecosystem will do differently?
So you know, the thing is that, right, Ethereum has the benefit of a smart contract. Now, of course, Muneeb also mentioned there are two sides to it, which is security and versatility. But the fact that there's a smart contract does make it much easier to build many, many new things. So Bitcoin has the limitation that it's hard to program. So I think there's still a lot of work technologically. BitVM, I think, is a good point, which is how to leverage off the limited description of the Bitcoin language and still be able to build stuff. And I think because of that constraint, we will learn from Ethereum, but what we do will not be the same as Ethereum, I believe.
Red, I want to pull you into the conversation because I haven't yet. As an analyst who looks at this space, you're obviously looking at it a lot differently than the rest of us. What do you see as the current Bitcoin versus Ethereum narrative, especially as Bitcoin moves to becoming more than just a store of value?
Yeah, so I see Ethereum being a lot more collaborative than competitive with it. That's including the teams building within Ethereum. There are undercover BTC maxis in every ecosystem, so a lot of them are happy that they can go work with Bitcoin now. But a lot of the difference is BTC, the asset, is maybe going to be off-boarded elsewhere. Bitcoin, the network, I'm not seeing as many of those changes happening to it. So a good part of it could be everyone wants to use BTC, the asset, in other ecosystems. Things like BitVM might give you a safer way to do that, where you can now use it in Ethereum, on Solana, really wherever you want. So I see more usage of Bitcoin on other networks because of this.
What metrics of success are you looking for as the Bitcoin ecosystem expands?
Liquidity is one. There is not a lot of liquidity in different versions of wrapped and synthetic BTC, but safety is more of like a spectrum. It's not yes or no. So at some point, it might be BitVM, it might be something that comes after. We'll probably hit a threshold where everyone says this is safe enough for me, and then you have all this untapped liquidity of BTC that actually gets utilized, and you can use it for yield and other things in different DeFi ecosystems, or within layers, still within the Bitcoin ecosystem.
I can chime in on the metrics as well. So I think there are two metrics that I personally think is very important. One would be the amount of BTC that is actively deployed into smart contracts and applications, right? Because if you look at Bitcoin, look at Ethereum, I would say something like maybe 25 to 33%, depending on when you measure it, of ETH is actively deployed. That makes it a productive asset and not a passive asset that you're just holding. Where Bitcoin, I would say not even 1% of Bitcoin is actively deployed. So there's a huge untapped potential of deploying BTC. So I think you can measure it, and there are some people who are building the equivalent of like a L2 beat for Bitcoin, and it'll be great to have the stats that across all these different L2s, or even things like TBDC, which is Ethereum native, how much BTC is actually being productive. And I think we should see the chart, and that would be very amazing. The second thing I would try to measure is just the dev community. For example, in the Electric Capital report, Ethereum obviously has one of the largest dev communities. Solana is taking off as well. But imagine Bitcoin is a $1 trillion asset, and we could measure 600 developers that are on L1, and you could measure maybe 150 developers on Lightning, and same on Stacks. That's less than 1,000 people in total who are sort of working on a $1 trillion asset. Yeah. And I think we need to measure that. That also is my call out to developers, that you want to be in a blue ocean area where there's tons of opportunity and very little competition, right? So that metric would be very important to watch as well.
David, you look like you were having a good thought there. Anything you want to share?
No, it's fine. I agree.
Okay. Well, I have a question for everybody. It was originally going to be one for Red. So Red, we can start with you, but I'd love to hear each one of you chime in here. When we're talking about real-world use cases for Bitcoin, building real-world use cases on L2s and just utility overall, what else can we expect, or what do we want to see being built on Bitcoin beyond just this digital gold narrative, or beyond just being a store of value? I fully expect at least one of you to dissent with another, but we'll see.
Yeah, so DeFi, obvious use case, is kind of the extension from it being payments and a store of value. I think separate from that, which is not as much related to BTC the asset, but more so the network, is using it as a database because it's really the most secure and credible, neutral database you can use. And with new innovations in inscriptions with meta protocols like ordinals, you can kind of use it like a dynamic database. You can point things to each other and kind of continually update some state, and things are stored on-chain, not just a pointer, which is how most NFTs or things posted on-chain look. So meta protocols around inscriptions are where I think Bitcoin, the network, will be innovated on.
I mean, if you look at what Bitcoin is used in DeFi today, it's mainly collateral. So people have BTC, they escape hyperinflation currencies, and they use that to diversify the risk. But of course, we've seen that people don't want to pay with Bitcoin. And I think stablecoins are a very powerful use case. We've seen people use stablecoins in Argentina, for example. And it's a lesson learned also in the Bitcoin community, yet people don't want to pay with BTC. Lightning was not able to deliver on that promise. But now we see stablecoins, and I think using Bitcoin as collateral to borrow stablecoins, create Bitcoin-backed stablecoins, and then using them to actually pay for things and make it more useful, I think will be one of the big unlocks. And we see the demand both on Ethereum already with WBTC, and you see what Tron is doing with USDT. Now imagine you could just bundle this and allow people to use Bitcoin as collateral to get stablecoins on-ramp, off-ramp, but do that within the Bitcoin brand, within the Bitcoin ecosystem, without having to learn about any other network, and just abstracting away the complexity and telling people, look, you have Bitcoin, you can get stable coins, you can cash in, cash out, you can pay, you can do whatever you want. I think that will be a major use case and something that we all should work towards.
All right. So I had 2 points, and I think he's already covered one of them, but I'll try to emphasize it in a slightly different way. So imagine you have Maker in the Ethereum ecosystem. Now imagine a BTC-backed stablecoin, and why is that important? I think the reason why it's important is that the final boss is always going to be governments. Like when Bitcoin becomes large enough, they're going to try and stop it, right? And one of the biggest choke points that we have right now are stablecoins, because they are centralized issuers. You can go to them. These issuers are becoming large enough. Like there's a joke that every smart contract chain is actually an L2 to Circle or Tether, because they can decide what fork happens or doesn't happen, right? And I think removing those centralized choke points by having a Bitcoin-backed stablecoin, like if there's one sort of digital money that you can trust, that BTC, and you use that as collateral for issuing these things. I think that's a very, very important application. The second one that I'm personally interested in is this idea of almost like a privacy DAO, where not like a fully open system like Tornado Cash, which I think someone is going to build, and that's good for the world. But just personally, I would want to see a privacy DAO where there's some sort of a checkpoint for members who join in. It might be KYC, like you do KYC with a central party or with a group of people. And after that, it's a privacy mixer, right? So the reason is that you can keep certain bad actors out of it, and I will feel comfortable that, okay, maybe one party knows like who I am, but the rest of people don't know who I am, and then I can have a privacy mixer for BTC that way. And I think that one is actually much better protected from governments, because a completely open one is going to get the hammer from governments like very, very quickly. But this one would actually survive and will give people like really good privacy guarantees for people who are just honest and they're not doing anything nefarious online.
Okay, so I'm not an application type of guy, but I do have some issue about sort of using Bitcoin as the data availability that you mentioned earlier, because Bitcoin has such a low capacity. So maybe a twist on that could be that the Bitcoin L1 can be a sort of a censorship-resistant backup for the layer 2. If you get censored on the layer 2, you can use Bitcoin as a censorship resistance layer. So you don't have to use it on a regular basis, but only when you get censored. So maybe that would be a good way of using the very limited block space of Bitcoin.
Any rebuttal?
Yeah, one thing to add on the stablecoin point that Alexei and Muneeb, you both mentioned is in most ecosystems, you'll see with certain metrics like active addresses, user activity, and then TVL as well, you have two kind of big moments where the ecosystem gets stable coins, and you have a lot more people participating because they're good things to pair in LPs. It's an escape from volatility, and then you have that moment happen again when you get liquid staking. So this is like that utilization of the asset, and you'll probably get both of those at the same time with BTC because we've solved these issues elsewhere, and once we can do one of them, we can do both. So those will probably both hit at the same time when we get there with layer 2s.
Very nice. Thank you guys for that. We are coming down to the final under 5 minutes. I want to ask 2 more questions that sort of mesh Ethereum and Bitcoin. Alexi, are there any tech stacks or dev tooling from the Ethereum tech stack that you think can interop well with Bitcoin?
So Bob, essentially, our mission is to really embrace this interoperability and use what Ethereum has created and make that available to the Bitcoin community. I don't think we should reinvent the wheel. I think what people want to do is they want to start building on Bitcoin today. And it's great, we have BitVM with so many new things coming on Bitcoin, but at the end of the day, if we tell people, look, in 2 years, in 1 year, you'll be able to do all these cool things that you can on Ethereum, that's not gonna get builders to start building now. And that's why, if you look at the L2 stacks out there, they can be made compatible with Bitcoin. You can allow people to start building using EVM tooling and then work on this intersection between Bitcoin and EVM to make it easier for a smart contract developer to start using BTC, to working with Bitcoin, without having to have this steep learning curve of understanding the UTXO set and all these kind of models that are different to the account-based model in Ethereum. And Bob, for example, uses the OP stack. And we make slight modifications over time to make it more and more Bitcoin friendly. But the cool thing is you can just go and deploy. You can start within a few minutes, you're up and running. And then what we work on is things like, okay, well, how about we use one wallet, only one browser extension for all your ETH assets, ETH entities, but also Bitcoin ordinals, BRCs, and all the other assets. Unify that experience. And there's so many more things, and we've had some really interesting conversations with some of the big ETH infrastructure providers, and what we see is there's lots of interest to explore, okay, how can we make that gap basically smaller? How can we ensure that people can work on Bitcoin without having to spend months and months of digging through documentation that is sparsely available on Bitcoin, but is widely available on ETH. And I think that is one of these superpowers that we can use to just kickstart this renaissance and get more people working on Bitcoin.
Thank you. All right, final question. We're going to start with David, make our way down. I want you guys to be thoughtful about this response. I think there is a lot that we can learn from Ethereum. We've got obviously a lot of Ethereum folks here. The core contributors for Ethereum have had monumental success over the last few years. As we're looking to build out the Bitcoin ecosystem further, what successes do you think Bitcoin builders can take from Ethereum?
No, you can go ahead. You want me to start?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Sure, okay. I think there are 2 things I would definitely want to take. One would be DeFi primitives who've been battle tested, right? So I think the same thing happened with Solana, that Solana is a different infrastructure stack, but if you look at the applications being built, those DeFi primitives are coming from Ethereum and other places. So I think things that are tried and tested, they can come to Bitcoin maybe on a different tech stack that is more native to Bitcoin, but the primitives are the same. I think that's one thing. The second thing that I would love to see is some of the funding models that have been very successful in Ethereum. If you look at Bitcoin Core, again, $1 trillion asset, there are 4 maintainers who are running on pretty small grants. I think maybe 30 people who contribute, have some pull requests, but 4 people who are maintainers. And the amount of funding around it is sadly nowhere close to what even Ethereum or Solana or other networks have. So we obviously want to play a role there ourselves, but we would love to borrow ideas from Ethereum in terms of just funding core development.
My take will be controversial here. It's that Ethereum's greatest asset is its fluidity and willingness to change, and a lot of people in Bitcoin world, kind of like the ossification. But because of that, alt L1s have kind of been Ethereum testnets for a while. If you have a good idea, like proof of stake or app chains, Ethereum's going to implement it because it's willing to change. And I think that attitude will help Bitcoin a lot.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. Experimentation.
So I think, yeah, experimentation definitely. And I think the other thing is embracing decentralized governance and experimenting with models here. I know like tokenization is always a controversial topic, and there are good things and there are a lot of bad things about it. But rejecting it completely, I think, is a dangerous game because at the end of the day, as Muneeb said, the end boss are like, governments that might come after Bitcoin at some point. And working with models where you can decentralize control, I mean, not on the base layer, of course. That has to be the final layer of defense. I don't think it's going to change. I don't think we should be modifying Bitcoin Core a lot. That's what L2s are for. And on L2s, we should go and experiment and embrace the kind of decentralization aspect, decentralized governance, and experiment with models there so that maybe as a community we can be organized. And then also as a community we can go and say, look, we have thousands of users, sorry, maybe even millions of users. We have thousands of different assets. We need something in Bitcoin Core. We need this one opcode like OPCAT or maybe ZK Verify. Let's kind of embrace this, and there's a reason why we should be doing that. But then organizing as a community, that will happen probably on the layer 2s because we have ways to decentralize governance, represent that on the ledger.
Well, thank you guys for listening. I'm looking forward to embracing and succeeding together in all the projects we build. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thanks. Hello.